Early access games are a weird thing. On one hand, they allow creators to make a prototype and see if it garners a reaction and sparks interest in people, but on the other hand, it's hard to give criticism on it because anything that can be said can just be refuted with the phrase, it's in early access, which is why the sensible thing to do is wait for it to be fully released.
Then why the fuck are you making a review of this game then, you absolute troglodyte?
Because despite Gunfire Reborn only being in early access, it's surprisingly addictive. Also, troglodyte, that's rich coming from the guy who eats toothpaste, you fucking cretin.
And? What's wrong with that? It's minty fresh. Probably better than this game, too.
Yeah, whatever. Actually, no. Wait a minute. How do you even eat that shit? You don't have a fucking mouth. Oh, I see. Dickhead. Anyways, let's talk about Gunfire Reborn, and seeing as that name is too long from here on out, I'm just gonna call it Gunfire. Gunfire is a first-person roguelite looter shooter, and despite it only being in early access, it's really good. Mainly because the gameplay of killing and grabbing new loot like guns and scrolls reminds you of when I used to play Borderlands, which fittingly enough is what I've seen a lot of people compare this game to, which isn't a bad thing, especially when you take into account how they nailed the idea of Borderlands but a roguelite better than what Borderlands itself tried to do with its Arms Race DLC. And in fairness, the game does do a fair bit to distance itself from that comparison. For starters, unlike Borderlands where the guns are separated by manufacturers like Hyperion and Jacobs with their own perks, in this game every weapon you find functions differently but is altered by their inscriptions, which are buffs each gun can come with like extra rate of fire or 50% chance to do an elemental explosion. Oh and yeah, elements. Basically they deal extra damage to certain health types, like fire is good against flesh, electricity is good against shield, and corrosion is good against armored foes. Kinda like in Borderlands, but if you affect an enemy with two different element types, it combos and creates a whole new element, like makes fire and corrosion to make explosions. There's also scrolls which give you passive buffs like more dashes or automatic crits after getting hit. There's also goblets which give you the option of upgrading one of three skills randomly chosen from the three skill trees. And finally, in terms of upgrades, we have talents, which are permanent upgrades that you buy with soul essence, which you get by killing enemies and bosses. Currently in the game, there are 4 characters to choose from, each with their own playstyles. Crown Prince, who specializes in crowd control and elemental damage, Owlby, who can dual wield any 2 guns and is also well versed in the art of explosives, which is my personal favorite, Queen Yan, who does a lot of melee oriented damage and is all about getting up close to the enemy and can only regenerate armor through his ability rather than over time, and Lilu, who is all about dealing electricity damage and chaining damage together. Each character is fun in their own rights and none of them feel particularly under or overpowered, and even when you have a solid build going you can still die, which is sometimes very annoying because a lot of the enemies are ranged and some, like the bandit retainers or longbowmen, stay at far range and have slight homing on their shots. See, unlike say Borderlands where you can sort of run and gun your way around and be mostly fine, in this game you are kind of dependent on having some form of cover, which isn't bad, but the way it is implemented is weird when the game's solution to difficulty is either swarming you with enemies or slight homing projectiles, and a dash move that you are kind of dependent on, and getting the timing incorrect by even a second results in taking damage slash dying. Perhaps if they shorten the dash cooldown a bit or maybe ease off for the number of enemies at once a bit, it could be better, but currently that doesn't seem to be the case. And while on the subject of movement, I find the default walking speed to be a bit slow, especially when fighting bosses. It becomes annoying just how much you become dependent on the dodge move to get out of the way of attacks. But aside from that, there are secret rooms which are usually a simple kill all enemies but with a twist, like all of them exploding upon depth, a platforming or trap puzzle, or an elite boss fight, like a mini boss almost. And in each one you are rewarded with a scroll, and these challenges range from easy to ball busting difficult with not much in between. The one where all the enemies are stoned until you shoot them is infuriating, and the boulder is what makes me want to drink poison. With how fucking random it seemingly is, but even with the flaws, I still think this is a good game, hence why I'm making a review on it despite it only being on early access. Seeing as the game retails for only $17 Australian, I'd say give it a look if you're a fan of looter shooters like Borderlands or enjoy roguelites. And yeah, that's it. If you enjoy, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tune in next time when I review a game that isn't in early access. Hopefully.